Hello, crafty friends. My name is Jessica, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I have a card for you using some Tonic Nouveau shimmer powders. I was recently inspired by Amy R's over at Prairie Paper and Ink. She was using these powders, and it had been a while since I had, so I decided to get them out. I went for a green theme because we're going to go ahead and use these die cuts that I cut out of Tim Holtz watercolor paper. These are the Abundant Leaves from Simon Says Stamp. And we're going to go ahead and use the shimmer powders on these leaves. Typically, I would normally make a shimmer panel of watercolor paper, but instead I went ahead and cut the leaves out first to see what kind of different looks we can get with it. So I did use the textured side of the watercolor paper. Tim Holtz has a smooth side and a textured side, and cut out a couple different additional sprigs on these dies. This is a full panel die, or what I would call a full panel die, and you get 3 sprigs, a large, a medium, and a small with each pass. And so I tried to use up the paper and ensured that I got a few extra. So that's why you can see that there are a few more than are necessary. So I went ahead and sprinkled the powders on top of my watercolor and then hit them with water. They are showing a little more white than I wanted, so I'm dipping them in the excess ink there, and then I'm going to go ahead and dry them off camera. Typically, I like to let my shimmer powders dry naturally, but for the sake of time, I did hit them with my heat gun. Now, after I've dried them, I'm going in one more time with this layer here before I clean up to see if I can get some additional layering and textures from this shimmer powder. I wanted more of a solid green color. I didn't like how much white were still on the panels, so I'm going to go ahead and ink them up one more time. While I used both green colors, the Falling Leaves and Green Parade, the Green Parade definitely showed through a little bit more with that darker green. So now I'm going in for the second layer of Falling Leaves in hopes to get a little bit more of that yellow-green color that we're seeing initially. One of the questions that might be asked is, does these shimmer powders rub off? Now, I've been letting my card dry all day, and I just went over and kind of rubbed the leaves briefly. And I do get just the slightest bit of shimmer transfer, especially after all of these layers. But I was not concerned about the amount that came off. It was very, very minor. So I went ahead and heat these again one more time, and here's a quick close-up to see what sort of texture that we got with those shimmer powders. Absolutely beautiful. So we're going to go ahead and set those to the side, and we're going to build the background panel. I fell in love with this organic leaf stamp set from the Be Bold release with Simon Says Stamp. It is so much fun. So since I haven't used it, I went ahead and added a little stamp cleaner to it and rubbed it off just to get off that pre-production sort of film that sometimes is on these stamp sets. And we're going to go ahead and go in with the new Be Bold release inks from Simon Says Stamp. This is Sky. I think this is one of my new all-time favorite colors. But to mix it up, we're going to go ahead and turn that panel 180 degrees, and then we're going to go in and stamp it with Dusk. This is the medium color with this trio. And then we're going to finish it by taking that background panel and moving it from a vertical orientation to a horizontal, and then we're going to stamp it with Night. I also recently played with these inks on a higher level and did them in my number 15 color blend series. So I will link that above in a playlist. Look at that really fun texture we got just by layering those inks on top of each other and rotating the panel to ensure that it all looks different. So much fun. Now we're going to do a quick clean. I like to try to keep my stamps clean for my next use. So I do use a stamp cleaner and a microfiber cloth to get those clean before I place them back. Now here's my initial fiddling. I'm still trying to debate what sort of sentiment we're going to add. So I'm kind of loosely layering these on here just to get a feel of what I'm kind of looking for so that I can gauge what kind of sentiment and other little embellishments that we're going to put on here. I knew I wanted to use this butterfly, so I went ahead and grabbed a piece of vellum, and we're gonna do some embossing powder. I went and grabbed the Simon Says Stamp clear ink, and then also doing a quick anti-static powder to ensure that I don't get powder where I don't want it, and this will help keep the image being very clear. I am using a shimmer powder that is, or not shimmer powder, an embossing powder from my stash that is not available anymore. It was one of those limited editions, I do believe, from Brutus Monroe. But this is a shifting one, and it's hard to see on camera, but it looks black, but when you tilt it, it'll turn blue. So if this isn't something that you have in your stash, I just recommend using a darker color. You could use a dark navy or black to get the similar results that I did. Now we're going to go ahead and use the dies to cut this butterfly out, and you'll see that I am in need of a new little die cutting machine. I think I've worn this one out. I have to use a shim, and I was a little bit shocked that I needed to use a shim with the vellum, but I ran it through once and it didn't end up cutting all the way, so I have to do it one more time. You'll see me, I'm kind of struggling here, and I'm like, oh yeah, it doesn't want to come out, so I got to do it again. But I do need a new one. I think it's ran its course. I've used, multiple plates through this, and I've had it for a couple years, and it's just time to move on to a new one. If you have one that you recommend, love your recommendation down in the comments. I use the Sizzix one, but I'm always open to a better solution. I really love all the different elements that are included in the Celestial Wishes stamp set. This was the most recent Simon Says Stamp card kit stamp set, and the dies, it's just so much fun. It's got kind of like that folky feel to it, and I really enjoy that look. So, because I used vellum and it was a rather warm, humid day here in Michigan, I had my vellum curling. So, we're going to go ahead and set that dragonfly underneath a block while I get to gluing. This is the CZ design. Hello. I believe it's the scripty one. I really, really love the size of this. It does stretch all the way across an A2 sized card panel. And I really love the way that it fills up the space while also still feeling very dainty. So I went ahead and cut it out of 110-pound cardstock 3 times, and then we're going to go ahead and use some liquid glue to build up that sentiment. I love the way the dimension looks when you add additional layers of sentiments on top of each other, especially with this thicker cardstock. I always tend to do 3 on or 4. And if I'm using a thinner weight cardstock, I'll tend to do more. But I really love 3 is usually a pretty good number when you're using 110-pound. So because I use this heavier cardstock, it's really easy to line up these die cuts by pressing on the edges of the dies as you build them up. It allows them to kind of come together on top of themselves. Since this is such a dainty die, you're going to want to go light on the glue. Otherwise, you're going to see it on your black cardstock. Now, I am an over adhesive when it comes to all things. So as you see, I used way too much glue. It doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, just make sure that you go in with a little bit less. So we're going to go ahead and trim this panel down. I do not have an exact dimension, but I just want a very small white border around the edge. So if I had to guess, it looks like it's a little less than 1/4 of an inch on each side. I would love that little trimmer for ease. My bigger trimmer is across my craft room, but that little one, I don't have a good ability to determine how much I'm taking off. So I just kind of eyeball it and hope that I'm right. So now it's time for the fiddling part of the video. Again, I'm kind of going in trying to figure out how I'm going to lay them down. I liked this look where I alternated them, kind of mirrored them across one side of the panel. And now I'm going to go in with a little bit of a thicker glue. This is Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue. While I dried these die cuts off camera, they were still kind of wet. I didn't dry them completely. And so I wanted a little bit of a thicker glue to ensure that we were going to have the best adhesive technique with the thicker glue versus the liquid. Now, you can use this little eraser to get off some of that glue. I was struggling a little bit, and then I just decided to hit the larger portions to kind of clean it up a little bit. I do love that a little eraser. It's good for getting off ink very quickly if you have it transferred in the wrong spot, as well as apparently glue in this case. So while I laid those first large leaves down flat, I wanted to add some dimension. So we're going to go ahead and use the foam squares from Simon Says Stamp. These are the ones that have the thicker loft. They have two sizes in their foam squares as well as two different lofts. So this is the thicker loft and the smaller square. They have larger ones in addition to these. And we're going to go ahead and mirror again these leaves from each side. So I'm just alternating them, kind of keeping the stems condensed in the middle because that's where I'm going to put the sentiment. I think I'm the queen of fiddling. I don't see this so much when others are building their cards, but I tend to start with products and then the vision kind of comes together as I move through the card. It seems like other card makers might have a vision that they just complete, where me, it's definitely a work in progress. And how the products kind of move forward is how I tend to build the card. Now, I was contemplating making the leaves different after mirroring them up until this point of adding these third sets, but I decided that why change it? So we're gonna go ahead and mirror them as well. I'm also popping these ones up just to kind of give that feeling of the leaves coming up over that sentiment, kind of that sentiment is nestled down in. I liked that, and now we are going to have the leaves kind of creating that dimension around it. Back to how I kind of process, and you what's neat about what I think about my process is you're kind of building the card with me. I'm definitely looking at it, making sure that that's the way that I want it, and we're moving through this process together. While it's sped up, it's still together. So the nice thing about these foam squares is Simon Says Stamp makes a black based foam square. So I went ahead and added some to the middle of this die cut. The way that these leaves are pushing up and with the dimension that I created, it's creating a dip in the middle. So that's why I put the ones on the middle of the hello there to kind of pop it up a little bit. And then I felt like it needed some on the edges as well, just from the way that the leaves are sitting. And so this is a very heavy dimensioned card. While I still think it could mail as long as your envelope is large enough, it might need some additional postage. So I'm big on giving cards out in person. And that's why I tend to go a little overly crazy with the adhesive and the dimension. So if you don't want it, this card would look still just as beautiful without all the added foam squares. So I also wanted to pop up the dragonfly, and what's really neat is with these black foam squares, you won't see them as much through the vellum and this kind of slightly translucent shimmer or embossing powder. So the black foam squares really help with that, which is really great because if they were white, you would probably most definitely see them. So I'm really excited to have these black ones in my stash. They come also in the two different sizes, the large and the small. So I bent the wings back a little bit just to give it a little bit more play. And of course, I can't not add jewels. So these are the Get Lucky Positively Dazzling jewels from Simon Says Stamp. I highly, highly recommend these jewels. They are so beautiful and come so far. I think they've probably released close to 10 or more different colors. The rainbow ones are needed. The clear ones are probably my go-to, but I also really love that they're coming out with these single tone jewels that kind of match the positively saturated ink lines. Typically, I tend to follow the rule of threes and the rules of odds when it comes to adding jewels, but I really just wanted to fill this beautiful card up with all of the beautiful things. So I went a little heavy with the positively dazzling gems. And this is going to finish the card for today. All of the supplies are linked below in the description box, so be sure to expand it so that you can see everything. I do use affiliate links, and what that means is that if you click on a link and shop with me, I do earn a small commission at no cost to you. So this is the card. I hope that you enjoyed it today. Let me know in the comments below if what you liked best about this card. It would look great in totally different color tones, and you could make a bunch of them all at once or make a singular one for extra specialness. Thanks for joining me today. Take care.